Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Oroville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission. This is actually the 22nd meeting we have had of this commission that was created by the state legislature to ensure that there is transparency, community input, and engagement in all things the Oroville Dam and Oroville Reservoir. And I've been really thankful for our local partners who have served on this commission and for all those that have been tracking the work. Um, we are going to get into some really good conversation today. It's a 2-hour meeting. We will conclude at noon. As always, there'll be an opportunity for members of the public to share input and ask questions at the end of the meeting as we work through all of these topics. And as always, we've maintained an action tracker at each of the meetings to ensure that the things that we talk about and that we ask staff to do actually get done. I think this is a great model that we've applied, frankly, to other public bodies, thanks to this work here. We'll learn more about action from the most recent meeting, the last meeting, and then all the things that we talk about today we'll put onto the action tracker um, for next meeting. So before we start, we want to understand who is here representing your various organizations on the commission today. So I'm going to turn to my colleague, Tara Alpaugh. Big thanks to Kearns and West, who is our consultant that keeps us well organized in these meetings. And I'll turn to you, Tara.
Thank you, Secretary. Good morning, everyone. When I call your name, please indicate that you're present. And if you're stepping in for someone on my list, please state your name clearly for the record. So for the California Natural Resources Agency, Secretary Crowfoot,
Here.
Assembly Member Gallagher, or Assembly Member Gallagher's designee.
Yeah, hi. He should be joining us, but this is Julia Cordy from his staff.
Thank you, Julia. Senator Dolly's designee, Bruce Ross.
Uh, I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. Department of Water Resources, Director Namath's designee, Lead Deputy Director Gibson.
Hi, here. Thank you.
Thank you. Office of Emergency Services, Director Ward's designee, Deputy Director Nazura. Department of Parks and Recreation, Director Quintero's designee, District Superintendent Allen.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here.
Thank you. California Highway Patrol Commander's designee, Lieutenant Patrick Leach. City of Oroville, Mayor Pittman.
Here.
City of Oroville, Vice Mayor Smith. Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Conley.
Here.
Butte County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Kimmelshoe. Butte County Board of Supervisors appointee, Commissioner Bateman.
Yeah.
Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Stevens.
Here.
Sutter County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Boone. Yuba County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Furr. Yuba County Board of Supervisors appointee, OES Manager Marin. Butte County Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Beller. Sutter County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Lycan. Yuba County Sheriff's Office, Operations Captain Liebarger. We have 9 commissioners present, which does not reach a quorum, given that this will not be considered a formal commission meeting, but instead will be a public workshop, and we will continue with the agenda as set.
That sounds good. And I don't think that will have any meaningful impact on the content or the quality of the discussion, given that we're not taking any formal votes. So, as we start the meeting, I just want to acknowledge the passing of a great American and Californian, Congressman Doug LaMalfa. His death has been a blow to so many and to our region. Congressman LaMalfa was both a champion on water issues and an expert on water issues. Actually, days before his passing, he and my boss, Governor Newsom, were texting back and forth because Congressman LaMalfa was making some suggestions as it relates to water management to enable more water supply. I know this because Director Namath and I were asked by Governor Newsom to track down the congressman's suggestions. His passing leaves a huge gap in leadership for the state and on these issues. And we just want to acknowledge his decades of leadership. On a brighter note, I want to share that after our last meeting in Oroville, two commissioners, Robert Bateman and Bruce Ross, along with my colleague, our Deputy Secretary for Water at the Natural Resources Agency, Samantha Arthur, joined the Department of Water Resources scientists on their Feather River Floating Classroom, which is a pretty incredible program that they have to get people out on the river to learn about it. And I heard these folks that went were able to see Chinook salmon spawning within feet of the boat and had a chance to learn about the work being done at the Feather River Hatchery, along with improvements to the Feather River habitat that helped support both spring and fall run Chinook salmon returns last year. So huge thanks to DWR. I know that was open to all of the commissioners, and I hope other commissioners might have the opportunity in the future to do that. It really just helps with sort of the intimate understanding of just how the river works. Before we're going to get into the agenda, I really consider this a shared leadership role that I hold both with our Assemblymember Gallagher and our Senator Dolly. I'm not sure either is here today, but I wanted to give either they or their designee any opportunity to share any thoughts or updates they may have. All right. I know you'll be active too in the conversation, so
I
no
just
need
saw
to.
Assemblyman Gallagher pop up.
Oh, great.
Here, sorry.
Hey, Assemblymember, I was thanking you as always for your leadership helping initiate this thing. We're on our 22nd meeting, believe it or not, and just wanted to ask if you had any updates you wanted to provide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. And first of all, I want to say your kind words about Congressman LaMalfa. Yeah, it is a huge loss for us in the North State, and was a leader on so many different things. Certainly on water resource issues. He cared very deeply about the work that we're doing here. Was always ready to give thoughts on how to better manage our water system. I mean, we are really missing his leadership, and so I think part of what we're doing here today is trying to carry on some of that legacy of ensuring that our projects are working at the at the top performance, safety, water management, flood control. I think there's been a lot of good work done. I mean, again, I think we continue to make good progress. We are, obviously working on, many fronts right now. I don't want to lose the view of flood control, even though we haven't had like a whole lot of flood events lately. That's always something I think that is really on our minds, is to make sure we continue to make those investments. There's been some discussion of that in the legislature. How do we get kind of back on track with making those investments in levees and such? Anyway, I think we've made a lot of great progress together, and have been very honored to be part of of this commission that Senator Nielsen and I helped create with the legislation. And looking forward to the presentations today and the continued discussion that we're having on on multiple fronts here.
Well, huge thanks, and thanks so much. And I think you'll find a couple of these topics really interesting and important because they were raised by commission members as a result of these conversations. Bruce, I don't know if you want to say anything on behalf of Senator Dolly.
Just similarly, some recent events. This started after the Oroville Dam incident, of course, and there was something not quite as dramatic, but pretty scary incident with Yuba Water and Willie's here, and probably hear some of that. So I mean, it does bring home that this work and these investments do require constant attention, and they're not small investments by any means, but there's some critical safety issues. So I appreciate the work of everyone in staying on this. And on a lighter note, the floating classroom was amazing. And for those who have not done it, take the opportunity next time you see it coming around, because more fish than I've ever seen spawning in one place in my 30 odd years in Northern California. So it was pretty cool. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, big thanks, Bruce, for going. And I appreciate that you reference Willie Whittisley, who's here, who leads the Yuba Water Agency. And at some point today, be good to just get an update on the challenge that they had with the infrastructure recently. I think it's called Colgate Penstock. Would be good to get an update on that. So I'll tell you just a quick overview of today's meeting. Always, the topics are always selected by the commissioners. We're going to first hear from the Army Corps about their findings and recommendations regarding the City of Oroville levy. The report is the output of the Corps' one-time levy screening program inspection of the Oroville levy that they completed last year. That inspection came about as a result of some concerns raised by Oroville leaders in this commission and discussions across agencies and jurisdictions at this commission. We are going to hear from Yuba Water Agency about the new Bullard's Bar operations on the Yuba River and the coordination they do with DWR to manage flow downstream on both projects. And then we're going to hear an update from my colleague, the Deputy Secretary Arthur. She'll provide a very brief water control manual process update. In other words, an update on the process that the Army Corps is having. Jenny Fromm from the Corps, as you know, the Corps has been able to join us in the past with these updates. But now that the NEPA process is underway for the water control manual update, the Army Corps staff are hosting their own public meetings on the topic, and they won't be attending additional public meetings not hosted by the Corps. They have to be fairly, very specific and careful about the public outreach and work they do under NEPA. And then following the update, we have several of our local commissioners have been tracking and engaged in that process to update the water control manual, including attending the Corps' February meeting, and they'll provide an update on their observations and priorities. And then finally, we'll end with public comment, where we invite members of the public to share thoughts that they have either on topics that we're talking about or other topics that they have. Lastly, before we jump into the agenda, I usually turn it over to our colleagues at DWR, whether it's Director Namath or one of her colleagues, to share an update from where you sit, just given how central DWR is into managing the reservoir. So let me turn it over to my colleague, Tom Gibson. He serves as Lead Deputy Director at DWR. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Secretary. And it's good to see Willie from Yuba Water Agency. I look forward to hearing from him today. Long time no see, Willie. We're also looking forward to hearing about the City of Oroville's levy screening report. We at the department were happy to participate in that screening process through our flood management experts. The screening process there is a good example of the continued collaboration between local, state, and federal agencies proactively addressing the region's concerns within the flood management system. Before we start today's presentations, I want to invite DWR's Deputy Director in charge of the State Water Project, John Yarborough, to provide us with an update on the current water year outlook and our operations at Oroville Dam. So, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Lead Deputy Director, and good to be here with you all. I can't believe this is our 22nd meeting. It's been quite a lot of good information discussion here over that time. This has been another interesting water year, which has become normal as we see climate change unfold here. This year, we've seen some periods of really strong precipitation, followed by some extremely dry periods and some extreme warm periods. This led to, we have about average precipitation statewide, but we have a really low snowpack, really affected by that warm temperature that we saw in March, where we were 10, 20 degrees warmer than usual. In the northern Sierra Nevada, where our state's largest water supply reservoirs are located, including Oroville, the snowpack was just 6% of average on April 1st. And that's a key date for us because April 1st is typically when we see the peak snowpack. And so we were only at 6%. This year we saw our peak snowpack back February 24th, so almost 40 days earlier in the year. So while we've been able to see Lake Oroville filled the capacity each of the last 3 years, this year, because we really count on the runoff from snow to help us fill the reservoir up as we get into the spring, and we don't have that snow, so we're not expecting to be able to fill the reservoir this year. Um, so we are conserving as much water as we can while still meeting our downstream requirements. The other thing I wanted to touch on is as part of our effort to ensure public safety, we have hosted an emergency exercise in March with 24 different local, state, federal emergency partners, including the Butte County Sheriff's Office, the Weather Service, and CAL FIRE. And these exercises are an important way that our DWR team interacts with our partners. We go through what the communications would look like during an emergency. We practice those communications and get to know the folks that we would be interacting with during an emergency. So these exercises are a really important part of our overall safety program for the facility, and had a really good, successful exercise. So really appreciate all the participation from the partner agencies. So with that, thank you, and I will hand it back to you, Lead Deputy Director.
Thanks, John. I also want to mention that the department has seen hopeful progress on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, relicensing front. As many of you are aware, we've been waiting for our new license for almost 20 years now. And in February of this year, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued its concurrence on the biological opinion. So with that concurrence, we're hopeful that the new license will be issued this year. And I also want to thank Mayor Pittman for his recent letter to FERC on behalf of the city of Oroville, recognizing the benefits that this new license will bring to the community. And of course, we will notify this commission of any FERC license updates when they happen. With that, back to you, Secretary Crowfoot.
Hey, thanks. That's a huge deal and very promising, because I think we've all talked about that FERC relicensing being a really important moment. And as Mayor Pittman pointed out, of real benefit to the region and the communities around the reservoir. So good news there. And maybe let's just say that if we get any update from FERC, we can share it just via email with this commission, given that we don't meet, like on a monthly basis or something like that. All right. And within my notes, it says we were hopeful that actually FERC was going to be able to present on their licensing process and give us an update, but they weren't able to do that at this time. So we'll continue to nudge them and hopefully get them at the next meeting happening later in the summer. I just want to take a moment before we dive into ask if any commissioners have any breaking updates or specific information on any happenings they want to share. And then I'm told, please raise your hand if you'd like to offer an update before we begin. So that would be like your virtual hand here on the Zoom. Or you could just take yourself off mute. All right, then let's dive in. I guess, oh gosh, one more quick update. We're going to ask Tara Elpaw, who started us off with the roll call, to give an update on the status of the triennial legislative report. What it is essentially it is a report from this commission to the legislature that was required by the law that created us, essentially to help the legislature understand what's happening and frankly to hold us accountable for ensuring that we are meeting and doing good work. So last year we shared the draft outline of the report and received feedback from a bunch of the commissioners. And in May we're going to share a draft. Oh, Tara, I'm stealing your thunder. Let me turn it to you.
No, I was perfectly happy to let you give that update. Thank you, Secretary. So as the Secretary mentioned, we shared the outline with you last year. We have been working on this report over the past year, compiling materials from our past 3 years of meetings as they relate to planned and completed dam maintenance and improvements and flood management projects on the Feather River, along with a register of all commission communications. So in May, you can expect a draft report to be shared with you via email, and it will also be posted on the website for any interested members of the public to provide comment. We'll have a 3-week comment period, after which we'll make any revisions as needed and finalize the report to go to the legislature. Any written commissioner reflections on the work of the past 3 years, comments on the report, and that compiled commissioner correspondence I mentioned with CNRA will be included in its own section of the report. So you're welcome to provide written comments that share your thoughts, and we'll document those in the report itself. So please look for that in May, and thank you for your patience. Okay, back to you, Secretary.
Awesome. Thanks, Tara. All right, let's get into the core of the meeting here. Excited to welcome Michael Gonia from the Army Corps of Engineers. Michael is going to share an update on their levee screening report for the Oroville levee. And in February, I believe Michael presented his report of findings to the Oroville City Council in collaboration with the Oroville City Manager, Brian Ring. And so it'll share much of the same information today to all of us. And then I would just say before we turn, so let's turn it over to Michael.
Great. Thank you all. Again, good morning. So as introduced, I'm Michael Gonia, and I'm a geotechnical engineer with the Corps of Engineers Levee Safety Center. I sit out of the office in Seattle, Washington, and I'll be discussing the levee performance and risk assessment that was done on the Oroville, California levee just downstream of the Oroville Dam. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the things I'm going to cover today, I'll cover a little bit of background about what this levee review process is, and then I'll go into some of the findings, our high-level findings on the components of risk, which are hazard, performance, and consequences. And then I'll discuss a little bit about the recommendations that are coming out of this report to help manage and do a cost-effective risk management. Next slide. Okay, so what is levee review? And this is a voluntary process in which the Corps of Engineers conducts a field visit, documents the levee condition, and then performs a screening level risk assessment. And so we're going to cover the 3 main components of risk, which are we're going to assess the hazard, which is basically what is the likelihood of water reaching the levee and then overtopping the levee. We're going to assess the performance. So given that loading, when water's up on the levee, how is that levee going to respond? How will it perform? What are the vulnerabilities? And what is the likelihood of failure? And then we're going to assess the breach consequences. So given that loading occurs and there is an unfortunate breach, what are the consequences in both economic and life safety concerns? And one note there at the bottom of the screen, if you can all see that, I wanted to a little bit highlight the scope of this effort, and that the levee review process is not intended to form a decision on the National Flood Insurance Program accreditation status. So that is kind of a separable scope than what we were looking at for this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we're hoping to get out of this, and we had the city of Oroville participate, and you can see there's various audiences here that might have a different kind of look at this, and so you can read that on your screen. I'll just highlight, from my understanding from the city of Oroville, they're really hoping to understand the current conditional levee, its vulnerabilities, and have some sense of how to prioritize with limited dollars. What are the activities that are going to give you the most bang for your buck when you're reducing life safety risk for the community of Oroville? Next slide. As has been discussed on this call already today, we had very fortunate to have participating agencies from local, state, and federal partners. And so we had the California Department of Water Resources, City of Oroville, Sutter Butte Flood Control Association, and their engineering support from RNF Engineering and HDR, and the Corps of Engineers with their engineering support from WSP and Geosyntec Engineering. And I think it was mentioned already today, this occurred last year, May of last year. Next slide. Okay, so bottom line up front, what were our major findings of this? And overall, our assessment concluded that this levee classification had a low life safety risk. And the primary characteristics of this levee that drove that kind of conclusion was when we looked at the potential for consequences, we noted that emergency planning, community risk perception, and historic evacuations were all major contributors, that the community had a high perception of its levee and function, the levee's purpose and function, and that the emergency planning and past examples of good evacuation procedures led to that conclusion. Second, as you all know, this levee is downstream of Oroville Dam, and that greatly reduces the frequency and severity of flooding at this levee. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And finally, the levee was expected to perform adequately, but there was a critical levee reach that's vulnerable to poor performance. Next slide. Okay, so the first step in this process is really to do a data collection, and that's kind of to comb all of the historic records, look at design, construction, anything that's available on analysis, and we did that field site where we looked at the current condition levee. And so from that levee is constructed this in 1907, the modifications in the 1930s where it was widened with dredge tailings from gold mining operations, high water events in 1955. We had the Oroville Dam constructed in 68, and then some flood performance issues and evacuations ultimately in 1997 and then 2017. So took a look at all of that information. We started to develop and talk about the possibility and likelihood of levee poor performance. Next slide. Okay, so our major findings on hazard. So as mentioned already, pretty beneficial that this levee is downstream of a regulating dam, Oroville Dam. Our hydraulic analysis showed that, and we were fortunate to have hydraulic modeling support from the local engineering group, RNF Engineering. And ultimately, the discovery was that overtopping would be about when there's about 300,000 cubic feet per second flow in the river. And as you can see on the lower right-hand corner from the gauge, the Oroville gauge, that has not happened in that over 100 years of record, including flows prior to Oroville Dam regulation. We identified the overtopping location would be near Bedrock Park. And when the last bullet there is that we understand, and our team understood that there was a water control manual update to come. And so there was some uncertainty in how that would maybe change the likelihood of loading into the future. Next slide, please. And we took a look at the levee performance. If you've been to the levee in Oroville, you'll note that many of the levee section is overbuilt with dredge tailings. Some portions are over 200 feet in width. The dredge tailings themselves and the levee fill soils being dredge tailing primarily means that this levee is porous and that seepage through the foundation and through the embankment is probable. The critical section was identified at Bedrock Park. That's an area where it was the most narrow section and where some of our existing borings and explorations into the subsurface are showing some vulnerable soil types to levee performance. And the last portion there is talking about the vegetation along this levee, and that some areas where there's high vegetation and high velocities, if a tree was to overturn and create a void, a scour hole would emerge, and that could be a definite reason for erosion to initiate. Next slide. And then the last facet of this, of looking at risk, is going to be the consequences. So we had levee breach modeling done, and we used a program called LifeSim to evaluate how we model people's behavior and how they might seek protective action given that flood event, that breach occurs. And so some of these model inputs, as I talked about previously, we kind of evaluated emergency action planning and this community risk perception, how people will respond. And the past history gave us a pretty strong indication that during future evacuations that people would heed that warning responsibly and evacuate the area. We did note that the city currently lacks a formal emergency action plan with specific triggers on when to do that, and they rely more heavily on experienced people within their organization to help communicate that. And so some of the results, looking at this, we're going to see our breach modeling is showing that flood depths in this area is going to be typically 0 to 6 feet, a maximum of 14. And when our life sim analysis shows that average life loss is going to be less than one person, again, heavily weighted on the fact that we are expecting most people to be evacuated. Average dollar loss, should that breach occur, is going to exceed $100 million in damages. And then there is notes that there's critical infrastructure that we wanted to consider and highlight, showing non-redundant utilities, schools, medical facilities, treatment plants, and the evacuation routes themselves might be vulnerable. Next slide. All right, on this slide, I wanted to put this in sort of a national context. Oftentimes when we talk about risk, there is some extra context that might be helpful to understand what where the risk estimate for Oroville, California levy is in relation to other levies that we've evaluated across the nation. So what you're seeing here on the screen is called a societal loss plot. And each one of those dots represents over 2,000 levies in the United States and the Corps of Engineers risk estimate for those. You'll see that Oroville, California levy is within that green area, where we characterize as low life safety risk, and it is below that societal tolerable risk line, which indicates that it's a tolerable level of risk. Next slide. All right, this slide indicates some of the limitations of our analysis, and I wanted to highlight some of the things for future evaluation. And so this risk assessment was scoped and focused on the levee itself and did not quantify other flood risks to this community, including interior drainage when rainfall comes into this area, and especially when the river's up. Most culverts rely on gravity. If the water's up, you're going to see backwater into those areas, and I think that's happened in the past. You can see those two twin culverts near Dry Creek down in the south beneath Highway 70. And also there was concerns about the volume of seepage both through and underneath the levee system. So we did not quantify those, but wanted to highlight those as potential for things for future analysis to kind of understand. Certainly the consequences of some of these would not be as significant as what I talked about on previous slides, but still definitely something the community would likely care about. Okay, next slide. And next I'm going to move into the recommendations here. And so we had 8 recommendations. These are the kind of prioritized recommendations to help reduce the risk. And this is provided to the city in our report, along with some conceptual, order of magnitude cost estimates. And so our recommendations, number 1, knowing that the Oroville Dam Water Control Manual update was happening, we wanted to recommend an update when that is finalized. And that indicates that there may be a shift in our understanding of hazard, and the likelihood might shift just by the way that the Oroville Dam is managed. Second, we wanted to recommended that the city expand its flood fighting capability with training. DWR has training for flood fighting and offered that to the city. Number 3 is to create an actual operation maintenance manual, a written one that will help them manage the levee. And the Corps of Engineers provided a template for that process to get started. Number 4 and 5 are kind of a combination. Number 4 is to evaluate the subsurface soils in the areas of critical levee sections we identified. And number 5 would be, given those results, if they are kind of conclusive of what our assumptions were, that there could be a structural improvement there needed, and to complete that item. Number 6 would be a detailed inventory of pipes along the levee. Conduits and pipes that cross the levee have oftentimes been bad actors, especially when pipes are aging and kind of at the end of their service life. Number 7 is to develop a levee-specific emergency action plan with triggers to help ensure that the good evacuations that we've seen in the past will continue into the future, and that specific actions that are needed to manage the levee during those flood events are occurring, and that people know whose responsibility is to do what action. And finally, this is again related to the last slide about quantifying other flood risks, both interior drainage and that under seepage or through seepage of the levee, and how that might impact the community. Okay, next slide, and I'll kind of wrap up this. This is now time for questions and answer discussion points, and just really wanted to thank the city of Oroville, DWR, and all those that participated in this levee review. I hope that you guys on the phone learned something today, and hope to see that the recommendations and flood risk management actions are continued in this process. And hopefully, as someone had mentioned earlier, this is really a good example of local, state, and federal partners acting together to help kind of have a shared responsibility in flood risk management. Thank you.
Michael, huge thanks for bringing your expertise down to California, and big thanks to the Army Corps for this assessment. I think I certainly learned a ton from the presentation, as I hope others did. Before we open it to general questions or comments, I want to turn to Mayor Pittman, because this has been a big priority for the city of Oroville, and I shared that Michael had provided this presentation to the city council. So, Mayor, just interested in any takeaways you have or any broad comments you want to frame the discussion.
Well, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. I appreciate that. My first thought is to think back to all the leadership of the past, back in the 40s and the 50s, the city of Oroville, the county of Butte, the cities of Marysville, and everybody downstream. Clearly, flood control was a big issue, and now we see the benefits of the Oroville Dam on the Feather River. I gotta respect that, and Governors Goodwin Knight and Governor Pat Brown leadership in providing such a facility. I think the focus on maintenance of the levee brought by the Army Corps is a huge effort and a new responsibility for the city of Oroville to make sure that, the integrity of the levee is as it should be. And then I think we have a good plan to address our particular issues, Bedrock Park being one, and the surface rain drainage management system is another one that will fall to our local responsibilities. But I think it's an overall great product. And I think if we can take a lesson from here is everybody downstream ought to pay attention to what everybody's doing to correct their issues, because that 97 flood was never predicted. And I don't think everybody ever thought it would happen, but it did happen. And it gave us a great training base for the future to carry forward. And we certainly will be working on all the things recommended by the Army Corps. I want to thank all the agencies that participated, because truly the safety is a partnership. And we want to thank all the agencies that partnered with us. It's kind of weird for 3 days to have your city analyzed by people from outside with 13 or 14 engineers all in the same room. And I was wondering how he's going to get agreement, but he did. He did a good job. And anytime you get two engineers, you'd never get agreement, and you get 13 of them in the same room. Boy, it was an experience, that's for sure.
Wow. Well, and just huge that the Army Corps can bring its expertise and focus in on that. So I'm really thankful, demonstrating like these different levels of government working together. Let's turn, if we could, to anybody who has questions for Michael or any comments they want to share. You could either put your hand up and Tara will call on you, or you can just simply take yourself off mute and start talking.
I believe we have a question from Michael Bissett from Sabufka. Michael, I've unmuted you.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Secretary Crowfoot and members of the commission. My name is Michael Bissett. I'm the Executive Director of Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. I first want to thank the Army Corps and DWR for implementing and conducting this levee safety inspection. It was a real valuable exercise. Michael and his team were terrific. And it was really great that at the end of the study, it was determined that there's a low life safety risk for the city compared to other national studies that the Corps has conducted. I just wanted to point out there's still a concern. Well, the Corps had a whole list of recommendations which we're trying to assist the city on. But Michael touched upon it real quick at the beginning of his talk, that his study did not coincide with National Flood Insurance Program. So there's a big concern still outstanding that once FEMA comes in to remap the city of Oroville, the entire floodplain that was shown on one of the slides is going to get mapped into the floodplain. So that's a big concern for the city. Our agency are trying to assist the city to move further on some of the recommendations, most notably doing some geotechnical analysis of the levee to better understand through and under seepage deficiencies that this levee has, and how to remediate those deficiencies. So, we're still partnering with DWR to look for funding opportunities in the future, with the understanding that the state budget's not in a great position right now, but any future opportunities would be most welcome so that we could start assisting the city in some meaningful geotechnical investigations to further their flood risk reduction. So thank you for that. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Yeah, copy that, Michael. Thank you for putting this in context and identifying the continued desire to bring more investment to the work.
One more item I should mention, Secretary Crowfoot, is we do have a new restaurant coming into town right next to Highway 70, and they've done some geotechnical boring into the subsurface, and a new discovery of gold came up. So maybe the future of building new buildings will be to bring that gold that apparently was missed in the dredging operations.
Whoa, that's an unexpected pleasant surprise, right?
Yeah, we expect during the excavation there'll be a lot of folks down there with gold pens.
Amazing. Anyone else want to share questions or comments before we move on to the next item?
Very briefly, and this might be irrelevant, but one of the things that surprised me when we first started having conversations about the levy here is it it's obviously important to the city, but is there not actually somebody who is considered the owner of the levy? Is that my understanding, or is the city the owner of it?
Let me explain that. The city has delved into this, and there's at least a little over 1 mile that clearly is owned by the city on what we call a river left. That goes back to the early 1900s.
Okay.
We established the ownership, and then the other parts of it are state property, as would be along a river course.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate
Good
it.
question, though. Thank you.
Very good. Mayor Pittman, big thanks for, one, being the squeaky wheel to ensure that this assessment takes place, and then two, just kind of shepherding it through and helping us understand it.
Secretary Crowfoot, we do have
Yeah.
one hand raised from the public too.
Got it. Let's go with a quick question from the public.
Richard, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
James, given the technical difficulties and our timing, I wonder if I'm going to ask Richard to hold until the public comment at the end and make sure he can ask his question then that we'll work to answer and address.
Okay.
So once again, big thanks, Michael, to you and the team at Army Corps, DWR for the assist, and the local leadership for this. Very helpful and I think productive for us. So now we're moving to New Bullards Bar operations and coordination. Excited to welcome Willie Whittisley, our colleague who serves as general manager at Yuba Water Agency. He'll provide insights into operation of the New Bullards Bar facility on the Yuba River and cross-agency coordination. As you all know, the Army Corps is also updating the water control manual at New Bullards Bar in parallel with the effort to update the water manual at Oroville. Now, there's obviously the two relate to each other and they're important, the parallel updates, because operations of both facilities together create flow conditions on the Feather and the lower Yuba rivers and can be crucial for downstream flood management. We also know that Yuba Water Agency is actively working to recover and assess reconstruction options following the February penstock pipe rupture at the new Colgate powerhouse. So going to turn it over to Willie now to tell us more, obviously, about the Army Corps update, but then also some of the emergency work happening at New Colgate. Over to you, Willie.
Excellent, Secretary Crowfoot and members of the commission. Thanks for having me. Secretary Crowfoot asked in the introductions if I'd give an update also on our penstock failure he just mentioned. So I'm going to present on our flood risk reduction efforts and our operations in coordination with Oroville. And at the end, I will give you a brief update on the penstock incident. At the time the presentation was due, I knew much less about our incident, and I know more now. So I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to field questions at the end. But to introduce myself, I'm Willie Whittlesey. I'm General Manager of Yuba Water Agency. And our primary missions are flood control and water supply. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to start by addressing our recent catastrophic event, the penstock rupture, in areas of dam safety. Yuba Water Agency's primary mission is flood risk reduction, and New Bullards Bar Dam and Reservoir, the facility which we operate to regulate high flows that contribute to flood risk, was not affected by the incident. It's 5 miles upriver from the penstock incident site, and it's fully operational. And we have and will continue to be able to manage flows through flood seasons and handle our water supply deliveries throughout the summer. So I just wanted to address the incident related to dam safety, and the dam was not impacted by the incident. And again, I'll get into the incident at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, for anyone who doesn't know us, in addition to flood risk, our other missions are sustainable water supply, hydropower generation, fisheries protection and enhancement, and recreation at our reservoir, New Bullards Bar. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll give you a little background on our reservoir, New Bullards Bar. It's a nearly 1 million acre foot reservoir, similar in capacity to Folsom Reservoir. Of the nearly 1 million acre feet of storage, 170,000 acre feet of that storage is dedicated flood storage, very similar to Oroville, but just smaller in scale. It is the 5th tallest dam in the United States at 645 feet high, and it provides water supply for Yuba County farmers and ranchers, resulting in a reliable, sustainable groundwater aquifer. I will also add that through the Lower Yuba River Accord, we also transfer water through the Delta to buyers south of the Delta. So it's also a statewide water supply and important for statewide water supply reliability. Next slide, please. Okay, historical factors that contribute to the flood risk here in Yuba County include its levees and the legacy of gold mining. You may know our region has a history of hydraulic gold mining in the nearby foothills in the Sierra Nevada mountains. This led to large quantities of silt being deposited in the rivers, raising riverbeds, in some places higher than the elevations of the cities themselves. And this is currently the case in Marysville, where I'm sitting today. To combat the floods resulting from the reduced river capacities, levees were built by early settlers, but in a piecemeal fashion. And this in turn exacerbated flooding even more as silt continued to build up in the riverbeds because of the levees, and the rivers were further manipulated by the construction of things such as debris dams and bypasses. You'll see on this slide, you kind of get, for those of you that may not know, because I always tell people Bullards is kind of in the shadow of Oroville, but they're relatively close. And you can see on this map, Oroville, and then Bullards is kind of right in the middle of the map. It's on the North Yuba River. There are 3 branches to the Yuba River, and only the North Yuba River has a flood control reservoir. There are many smaller reservoirs on the Middle and South Yuba River, but the only reservoir with dedicated flood control in the Yuba system is our reservoir, New Bullards Bar. I just wanted to point that out so everyone knows where they are and how New Bullards Bar contributes to flood risk reduction at the confluence of the Yuba and Feather Rivers. Next slide, please. Okay, Assemblyman Gallagher talked about, and I won't quote him, but I'll get close, I'll paraphrase, we got to get back to flood control. And we all know that, for those of us that operate dams, every year we operate our dams for water supply, and every day we operate our dams for hydroelectric generation. So just by default, those become like the day-to-day routine activities that we take care of. We maintain dams, we deliver water, and we generate power. Flood issues are more sporadic. And you can see on this graph that I'm going to say every 10 to 15 years, we have a serious flood event. And unfortunately, just the inherent nature of the infrequencies of our hydrology in California and flood risk, I'm not going to say that flood risk reduction or flood control or levee work takes a back seat, but it's just an infrequent occurrence. And so sometimes it just gets lost in the day-to-day work. But this graph is intended to show you the frequency of high flow events on the Yuba and Feather system. And this is showing flows at the confluence of the Yuba and Feather rivers here in Marysville and Yuba City. And you can see the significant events of, in these first couple events are prior to both Oroville and New Bullards Bar construction, but you can see a significant event in 1955, in 1964, and then a major event in 1986. This is after both reservoirs were constructed. 1986, there was a significant event, and we did have a levee failure here near Linda, just south of where I'm at, caused major damage to the community of Linda. And then we had the 1997 event, another significant event, and we had a levee failure in a little community called Arboga with additional major impacts to our community there. Unfortunately for the citizens of Yuba County, these two events that were nearly back to back when you think about the frequency of flood events, the communities of both Linda and Arboga, and frankly, the entire economy of Yuba County were impacted by these nearly back-to-back events, the 86 and 1997 events. Yes, we did have both Oroville and New Bullards Bar in operation during these events. And from what I understand, they were operated as intended and held back flood flows as they were originally designed. However, in Yuba County, we found that our levees were built tall, and the levees in both of those events did not overtop and fail from overtopping, but they failed for foundational deficiencies, or the foundation of the levees weren't strong enough to hold back the flows, and they basically kind of melted away like butter. It was a failure mode that we didn't completely appreciate, and since then we've put significant efforts into reconstructing the levees with strong foundations and getting to a greater than 200 level of protection for much of the urbanized areas in Yuba County. But the bottom line is to show you here the infrequency but the significance of flood risk on the Yuba and Feather system. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to talk about one of our current operational flood risk reduction partnership programs, the Forecast Coordinated Operations, or what we call FCO. Lake Oroville and New Bullards Bar Reservoir operate in coordination to improve flood protection along the Yuba Feather River system. And following the 1997 flood, studies were conducted and recommended improvements to coordination of flood operations between the reservoirs. I will say that the water control manuals for both Oroville and New Bullards Bar of the early 1970s talked about operating together and have requirements, but the resulting studies from the 97 floods basically said there needs to be more well-defined protocols. So following the 97 floods, these studies were conducted and recommended improvements to coordination of flood operations between the reservoirs. And this led to the creation of the Yuba Feather Forecast Coordinated Operations Program. And since 2005, the FCO program has been a highly successful partnership. And I'm going to briefly explain how it works. And this is in very simple terms. For some of you on this meeting, you probably work the FCO system, and there's way more details to be discussed. But the reality is the FCO system is a protocol for operators of both Oroville and New Bullards Bar to input our release data or our forecasted releases from both Oroville and New Bullards Bar into a computer program to allow both of us, and also including the Army Corps of Engineers, to see the anticipated flows at the confluence of the Yuba and Feather rivers to ensure that we're operating releases from both Oroville and New Bullards Bar not to exceed the channel capacities at the confluence. Again, FCO has worked really well. And the coordination, I kind of got thrown into this. My first year at Yuba Water Agency was the winter season of 2017. So I got thrown into this operation early on in my career here and got to well understand how the coordination works. And I think it is highly successful. And the communications between both Oroville operations, New Bullards Bar operations, and the Army Corps of Engineers is really good. Next slide, please. So in order to continue to enhance the strong partnerships and flood risk reduction efforts, the FCO program was created, and DWR and Yuba Water Agency started a new initiative called the Yuba Feather Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FERO. I know many of you on this meeting understand FERO, but it's broadly defined as a flexible water management approach that uses data from watershed monitoring and improved weather forecasting to help water managers selectively retain or release water from reservoirs. It supports decisions about how much water to keep during dry periods or drought periods and how much to release prior to storms. So basically, FCO laid the formalized foundation for our coordinated operations, and now we're, through the Water Control Manual updates, trying to advance into a FERO, or Forecast Informed Reservoir Operation. Next slide, please. So in a high level, the FCO led to FERO, and this audience understands FERO. Next slide, please. So like Oroville, the former reservoir flood operations for New Bullards Bar fall under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers water control manuals. These rules are primarily based on the time of year and generally do not include provisions to use specific forecasts or forecasted hydrology to inform our reservoir releases. So like Oroville, we are also working with the Corps to update the water control manual for New Bullards Bar in order to integrate FERO into our flood operations. Things are going well with the water control manual update and our coordination with the Army Corps of Engineers. Secretary Crowfoot mentioned that the Army Corps is currently going through NEPA. We are also going through NEPA for our water control manual update, and we anticipate getting a formal updated water control manual by 2027, so next year. Next slide, please. Okay, so our next major investment is the ARC Spillway, or Yuba Water Agency's proposed atmospheric river control spillway at New Bullards Bar. It's the next best project to advance the agency's flood control mission. It's an enhancement to existing infrastructure, protecting previous investments in downstream infrastructure, adding operational flexibility. And you already heard about the software, which would be Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations in the Water Control Manual update. We consider that the software, or what I call the paperwork and protocols that go along with implementing FERO. But this project, the ARC Spillway, will give us the hardware necessary to truly make FERO implementation as effective as possible. This new ARC Spillway would be constructed 31.5 feet lower in elevation than the current New Bullards Bar Spillway, and be able to discharge a capacity of 35,000 cubic feet per second, and have the ability to create and manage an additional 117,000 acre feet of reservoir space. I will interject here and say that the ARC Spillway is not being constructed because there's any deficiency with the New Bullards Bar primary spillway. It is a strategically constructed lower in elevation to release storage from New Bullards Bar in advance of oncoming storms. The ARC Spillway was designed for increased operational flexibility, including FERO-based advanced releases to convey water downstream in advance of oncoming storms to reduce downstream river levels during the peak event. This would in turn reduce the amount of water on the levees and minimize the risk of flooding. The spillway and FERO operations will provide for climate resiliency and increased public safety, with the potential increases in magnitude and frequency of large atmospheric river events in our region. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the reduction in flow downstream that potentially could have been realized if both FERO and the ARC Spillway had been in place during the 1997 flood event. So you see the blue line. The blue line is the flow in the Yuba River, in the Feather River below the Yuba River confluence. That's the blue line that actually occurred during the 1997 event. And if we had both FERO and the New Bullards Bar ARC Spillway, we would have experienced or managed the water to the red line, and basically advanced release prior to the peak flows, significant storage from Bullards, kept the peak flows lower through the pulse of the main storm surge, and then continue to release following the major storm surge. So basically we would have kept the elevation lower or the stage lower during the peak event, and that would reduce pressure primarily on the foundation of the levees, but also minimize the risk of overtopping. So this slide is basically an example of how FERO and the ARC spillway will work to reduce flows in our stream channels during a peak flow event like the 1997 event. Next slide, please. So in addition to all the operational improvements we're working on and the ARC spillway, our flood risk reduction efforts would be incomplete without the story of Yuba County levees. So since 2017, Yuba Water has provided over $96 million to local partner agencies to improve our levees and make other improvements to reduce flood risk downstream. However, it is important to note that it isn't the all-inclusive number. We've spent millions of dollars in our own routine dam safety and improvement projects, which are also vitally important in reducing flood risk. That's investments in our day-to-day operation, maintenance, and capital investments, primarily to New Bullards Bar Dam itself. We also use our revenue to leverage grants from state and federal government, and we now have more than $600 million in levee improvements in Yuba County since the 1997 event. And you can see the Yuba Water Agency investments in levee infrastructure since 2017. That's our primary use of hydroelectric generation revenue and Yuba River Accord water sales revenue. It's vastly the majority of the funds we spend are on flood risk reduction efforts and primarily levee improvements with our partners. So next slide is the questions slide. At this point, I will field any questions about my presentation, and when that's done, if we have time, Secretary Crowfoot, I'd be happy to give more detail about the Colgate penstock rupture incident.
Hey, thanks so much, Willie. Appreciate that thorough presentation. Let's turn to any members of the commission with questions or comments.
I see a hand from Bill Connolly.
Great. Supervisor Connolly.
Sorry, I have a dog barking in the background.
We can't hear it.
So I can understand this. Yuba Water Agency is willing to give up water delivery for public safety by building a lower spillway. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying, basically?
The fact of the matter is during flood risk years or years of significant hydrology where we have a flood risk, there is so much water in the system. When we do implement both FERO and the ARC spillway, yes, we will advance release water, but we're advanced releasing water to vacate flood space in New Bullards Bar for the period of the event. And what will happen is during the event, we will back water up into Bullards, very likely to near full capacity to minimize the surge downstream or the peak flow downstream. And
absolutely,
Yep.
I get it completely.
Okay.
I guess my point is that we're trying to negotiate, which we'll give our presentation later, the same thing at Oroville Lake, and bluntly, we're not getting that type of cooperation. So I really appreciate your presentation. I appreciate putting public safety first and building a lower spillway to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments? All right, Willie, why don't you just take 2 minutes to explain what happened with that incident? Just, this commission is obviously that came in light of the spillway failure back in 2019 at Oroville. So big focus and our attention is up when we hear, different infrastructure failure.
Yep, no problem. I'll make it brief. So the way our generators are set up is a little different than Oroville. Our Colgate generators are 5 miles downstream from our reservoir, New Bullards Bar. There's about a 4.5-mile tunnel and then about a mile-long penstock, a 14-foot diameter pipe that goes from the tunnel portal, the downstream portal, to the Colgate powerhouse. At the upper end of that penstock, we had a pipe rupture. Excuse me, this occurred on February 13th. It was obviously unanticipated. We had just conducted some maintenance in the tunnel and on the penstock, and the rupture caused about 400 acre-feet of water to be released from the tunnel. There was no dam emergency, and there was no continuous flow of water from the dam into the tunnel. We were filling the tunnel through a very small bypass valve during the incident. We immediately shut that bypass valve off. So the water that flowed down the hill as a result of the rupture was just the water that was in the tunnel. However, 400 acre-feet of water nearly immediately discharging onto the hillside caused major erosion, and it created basically two flow paths, one path slightly upstream of the Colgate Powerhouse and one path slightly downstream, and caused significant mass wasting or erosion into the Yuba River at Colgate Powerhouse. It caused sediment to be deposited on the top of the powerhouse and then sediment to be discharged into the river, along with accumulated debris at the powerhouse, including oils. These are primarily lubricating oils, but we did have an oil release into the river and subsequently into the Army Corps' Englebright Reservoir. We immediately jumped on the surface of the reservoir and contained the oil with log booms and oil absorbent booms. We contained that to the upper 1/3 of Englebright Reservoir, and within a couple weeks, we had all of that oily material removed. We worked in partnership with California Department of Fish and Wildlife's OSPR group, the Oil Spill Prevention and Response Group. And just a couple weeks ago, we did remove a vehicle from the river. We had to wait till flows receded. We removed a vehicle from the river and some electrical equipment. We are all done with our coordinated operations with OSPR, and the man-made or deleterious material has all been removed from Englebright and the river. We are now focusing on removing what we're calling the sediment fans from the river, the sediment deposited due to the rupture from the river at Colgate Powerhouse. That will get underway in the next few weeks. We are coordinating that, primarily we're coordinating all this work now with FERC, and FERC has been great to work with since this emergency. We've restored the road to Colgate Powerhouse. We have dug a significant volume of sediment off the top of the powerhouse and did an assessment of the powerhouse. I'll just say we're pleasantly surprised that the powerhouse itself is not significantly damaged. We're currently drying it out and testing electrical equipment. And I think most importantly, we have now launched the independent forensics team, a group of 5 independent engineers from throughout the country who are performing a forensic analysis of the cause of the rupture itself. I think getting the cause identified will be the most significant milestone that we need to perform the engineering design of the penstock rebuild. I don't think that the powerhouse or powerhouse-related infrastructure is going to be the critical path to get us restored. I think we would be ready to run the powerhouse once we get the penstock repaired. I think the penstock repair will be the critical path, and we need that independent forensic report so that we can fully design the repair. So with that, Secretary Crowfoot, I know it's slightly more than 2 minutes, but that's where we are today.
That's super thorough. Thank you, Willie. I'm going to ask probably to commissioners to hold off on any questions they have for Willie on this topic. One, probably because if you're in the county and the region, you've heard from them. But also, I want to make sure we get through our rest of our items here by 12 noon. So I know you can, Willie. You'd be glad to connect with people if they have questions or concerns directly. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Let's move on to the next item, which is a process update on the water control manual update for Oroville. So we've heard, obviously, over the last few years, the desire for commissioners to be kept up to date on the process to update both Oroville and New Bullard's Bar water control manuals. And as we've talked about, the water control manuals and public input process are both under the authority of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we've invited staff to join commission meetings as frequently as feasible for them to provide updates. As I explained earlier, they're now in the NEPA process. That's the Environmental Review process, the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA process. And that's officially underway. So the Corps can't speak about it at non-Corps process meetings. However, Jenny Fromm, who you've met and we've met from the Corps, did provide some status updates to us, which I'm asking my colleague Samantha Arthur to share now. So over to you, Samantha.
Thanks so much, Secretary Crowfoot. So as you mentioned earlier this year, the Army Corps of Engineers started their National Environmental Policy Act process for New Bullards Bar and the Oroville Water Control Manual updates. And I'm providing updates here that the Army Corps shared with me, and they will be having their own public meetings as well that are available for commissioners and the public to join. So the Army Corps asked me to refer interested members of the public to the Corps' website for the water control manual updates. There is a presentation and recording from their February NEPA scoping meeting that they held in Marysville. And so that's posted on the website, and I encourage folks to reference that. We have a link to that in the next couple slides here. So following the meeting, there was a scoping period during which members of the public were invited to submit input and information to the Corps relevant to the updates. And actually, let me just pause real quick right here and James, see if you're seeing me okay here, because I'm just seeing the secretary on the screen.
Yeah, we're fine.
We see you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so as I mentioned, following the meeting, there was a public scoping period during which members of the public were invited to submit input and information to the Corps relevant to those updates. Now looking ahead, the draft NEPA documents, so the National Environmental Policy Act documents, the draft water control manuals, and a draft engineering report are expected to be released in August of this year for public review. Approximately 2 weeks after that release, the Army Corps will host a public meeting, and community members will be invited to attend, ask questions, and submit verbal feedback at that meeting. They will also do a public comment period for 30 days for written feedback. Next slide, James. So this slide shows the NEPA schedule. We had seen earlier versions of this from Jenny Fromm when she presented to us. So this is the updated schedule. As you can see, they've moved through the scoping period, and we're now in the process where the Army Corps is developing these draft documents. And it shows there August is when the public review period starts, when those draft documents are released. Next slide here. Okay, as I noted earlier, the project information can be found on the U.S. Army Corps Water Control Manual Update project page on their website. So this QR code and also this link will direct you to that page. And we talked at our last meeting, so a reminder of folks that we posted this on our own Oroville Dam Citizens Advisory Commission website so that this would have easy access for folks to go to the Army Corps information. So we just heard here from Yuba Water Agency about their process and engagement in the Army Corps' water control manual update process for New Bullards Bar. So I wanted to invite Department of Water Resources to help me with this update and share their insights and their engagement in the water control manual update process. So Tom Gibson, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Secretary. We've heard about Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FIRO. The Department of Water Resources has been investing significant time and resources into FIRO for the last 8 or so years to best inform the manual using the latest forecasting and modeling technology. Director Namath and I have been tracking this and working with the State Water Project Deputy Director John Yarborough to support this effort. And we're looking forward to seeing how the Army Corps incorporates FIRO into its draft update, which, as I think most folks know, is anticipated in August. John, do you want to specifically weigh in on behalf of the State Water Project?
Sure, thank you. And so, yeah, a couple of thoughts I'd like to share. And one is, as we've talked about, there's been a lot of advancements in technology and the ability of operators to coordinate. And that was the forecast coordinated operations that Mr. Whittlesey just spoke about. And what we're really looking to see is these improvements that have occurred since the original manual was developed, want to see those get incorporated into a new manual. We really need the Corps going through this process to formalize these rules in a new manual. And so yeah, that's where I'm really excited to see us being able to use this new technology, new science, new abilities to get more benefits out of our existing infrastructure, because we already have this infrastructure, using it in new ways. That's a real cost-effective way to get more flood benefits, get more water supply benefits. And I'd say, Oroville, I think we're fortunate there that we're able to access these benefits of FIRO with our existing infrastructure because the way our spillway is set up, its size, so we're able to do this without needing a lot of additional infrastructure. With that being said, though, there are limits on how far this forecasting improvement has come, how far we've advanced, which means there's going to be limits on how early we can start releases, how early we can start a refill in drier times. And so right now, this considering how good is our forecasting ability, what are those limits? That's part of the work that the Corps is doing as they're going through their assessment of the viability study that was provided to them. And as the Corps is looking at this new forecasting ability and using that to come up with what a new manual would be, they're using as a starting point the existing flood space of Oroville that was set by Congress when Congress authorized the Corps to provide their investment into Oroville. So they're using that as a starting place. They're looking at the limitations of forecasting, and then they're also having to consider not just Oroville and how it would operate, but Oroville together with Yuba, together with other facilities, how the entire system has to operate together. So the Corps really has their work cut out for them as they go through this process. Say my team and I, we've been receiving a lot of comments and questions since the last OCAC meeting from this commission members and individuals in the Oroville community. And we've had several email exchanges. We've had a small group with some of the folks here at EWR meeting with that team and to go through how we're looking at the control manual update and to get perspective. And I got to say, we have some different perspectives that we all bring to this, but I think that's okay. I think it's helpful having these different perspectives that does challenge the department and how we're thinking about the work we do. It's good to get this feedback, so I really do appreciate that. But again, our main point here is we are striving for transparency while we really are prioritizing safety as we look at how to operate the Oroville facility. So it leaves us, the department, in the spot where we're really interested. We're really excited to see this product coming out of the Corps that they're going to release in August, because at this point, the department doesn't really have a role in this analysis. This is the Corps doing this work, and so we're really excited to see what they come up with, and then we'll all get that in August and be able to look at that and then respond. So thank you very much, and back to you, Secretary.
Yeah, thanks all for that update. It's been helpful for me because I'm not tracking this month to month, so I find it helpful. You mentioned that there's a number of commissioners that have already been engaging with the Army Corps on their update to the Water Control Manual, and they've asked to share some of their perspective and priorities with the full commission. I think we've talked about this as downstream perspectives, or folks that are representing living downstream from the dam, providing perspectives on the Water Control Manual. I'd like to hand it off to Supervisor Connolly and Commissioner Bateman, who I think have been selected to speak on behalf of the commissioners and interested parties who have been participating. So if you guys are ready, Supervisor Connolly, Commissioner Bateman, over to you.
This is Supervisor Connolly. I'll allow Bateman to do a presentation, and then I'll just follow after that. And thank you for the time and your consideration.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, good morning. I learned a lot from the Ballard's Bar, and it seemed to make the case that we are going to present that early releases are important and they shouldn't be limited by restrictions put on 50 or 60 years ago. The Feather River Recovery Alliance has coordinated the efforts of local residents and commissioners to provide a downstream perspective on the water control manual updates. We were formed in Oroville by local business people after 2017 to help the recovery. Everyone involved with the FRRA had their livelihoods and property threatened by inundation in 1997 and 2017. Some also in 1986. In 1997, one of us was told by someone from the Corps that his shop would be 20 feet under within 24 hours. I don't know how many of you have have believed that your home or business will be not there tomorrow. All of us have, many of us twice. And the cause was not nature alone. It changes one's perspective fundamentally. It's the reason we formed FRRA and why we're participating in this commission. Our view is that everything reasonable should be done to prevent threats of inundation and evacuations, particularly if the storage of water can also be increased. Some surface flooding is acceptable. If you find our views extreme or radical, please bear this in mind and consider what you would want to see in the updates if you were in our shoes. After the spillway, the FRA submitted a petition to FERC to hold the DWR accountable, signed by 6,500 citizens, and we have continued to raise concerns with FERC. We aim to assist in building trust in the DWR. We've coordinated the commissioners and concerned citizens in discussions with the Corps, the DWR, aimed at understanding the Water Control Manual update. Matt Mentick has been particularly helpful, and there have been many others. We got information from the FARO team, which was very interesting, and Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. We're all volunteers, and we can't meet the standards of presentation of those we've seen today. We advocate local communities' interests in minimizing the risk of inundations and evacuations. Next slide. What we've learned relevant to the Water Control Manual updates is that the DWR and Corps personnel stressed that safety would be the top priority. And until a few months ago, we were treated as partners in the development of the Water Control Manual updates. As has been explained already, there have been a couple of major developments that have allowed dams to be operated more safely. First, as is well known, the science of forecasting atmospheric storms has radically improved, and we are confident that the best forecasting science will be used in the updates. Secondly, the forecast-informed reservoir operation study for the Yuba Oroville was completed last year. This outlines various alternatives for relating the volume of water forecast that flow into the reservoir to releases from the reservoir. The long, rather complicated description of FARO on this slide is now simplified in comments made in reference to the next slide, which shows a summary of the implementation alternatives that the FARO study recommended. Next slide, please. The alternative plan 1 involves leaving most of the present flood control rules in place, but using improved forecast. The DWR has moved in this direction already, and we can see the positive results. Alternative plan 2 was not considered applicable for Oroville. So plan 3 and plan 4 are the two that could be considered appropriate for the upgrades. The present upgrade proposal stipulates Plan 3. Basically, Plan 3 keeps many of the arbitrary rules in place and leaves releases largely at the discretion of DWR. By arbitrary, I mean the rules that were based on the legal and financial considerations when the dam was built. We've already heard some reference to those. They do not use science to balance risk and water supply, while forecasts of inflows change continuously. Plan 4 does just that. The arbitrary rules are relaxed as is necessary to make the best use of science with systematic guidelines for releases. Next slide. This slide shows the regulated flood space. The bottom of the flood pool is set at 860 feet in the present Water Control Manual, so no releases are required until the reservoir reaches 860 feet. The present non-scientific wetness index, which allows more water to be stored if precipitation is low, but does not increase the flood pool if precipitation is high or significant snow melt is possible. The FARO space, which is based on forecast in place, for Oroville, this was given an arbitrary bottom of 835 feet. The lowest level to which the reservoir can be lowered is 813 feet, the bottom of the gates. Releases prior to the peak storms are the key to avoiding heavy flooding, as we've been told. So setting lowest level for release is 835 feet, well above the lowest possible level, limits flood protection. We were told that if the reservoir is lowered to 813 feet in advance of the peak of largest storms that can be anticipated in 500 years, releases would not exceed 150,000 cubic feet per second, which is considered safe. The downstream communities would then finally receive the protection they were promised when the dam was built. Next slide, please. Well, we've heard a lot about how the DWR's policy has influenced particularly the FARO study. In specifying the parameters, the DWR had a perverse influence. First, by limiting the FARO study to lowering the reservoir to 835 feet. Second, by specifying that only an additional 200,000 acre-feet of flood pool will be offered in the study during years of heavy precipitation, but asked the flood pool would be reduced in drought years by 400,000 cubic feet per second, sorry. And thirdly, there was no aspiration goal set for the amount of flood protection to be provided, although there was a goal for the increase of retaining water. These restrictions were hardly putting safety first, and the FARO study for Oroville was flawed by them. Limitations which seem correct scientifically came up during our discussions with the DWR managers. We were given no credible explanations. Rather, we were told it was his policy. In late January email from the Deputy Director of the DWR, it was stated that the DWR is looking to use FARO to gain more flood management and water supply benefits from existing flood reservation space. This eliminates Plan 4, FARO Plan 4, which involves a variable flood pool. He added that with climate change, the protection downstream communities can expect will decrease. Again, this was hardly putting safety first. We don't feel we are any partners in developing the WC updates. We just have to question or perhaps attack an agreed plan. We do not know who decided this plan or the reasoning behind it, which was a DWR policy to some extent. Why was the opportunity to provide 500-year flood protection while increasing water storage set aside? Perhaps because the FARO low reservoir limit was set at 835 feet. The next slide makes the case for improved protection. This sets out what I think nearly everyone here appreciates, the costs of the floods. The 2017 flood spillway event also had over 1 billion in repair costs from releases of 50,000 cubic feet per second. In 97 and 2017, Oroville was threatened with inundation and West Sacramento with dangerous flooding. Climate things will make things worse. The costs of those which were paid in settlement of claims, costs to downstream communities were much higher. Evacuation of 180,000 people in 2017 is estimated to have cost 50 to 75 million, none of which was reimbursed. There were evacuations also in 86 and 97. The protection has been less than is needed for storms expected 1 year in 30. Correct application of science will increase the storage of water at least 9 years out of 10. In the 10th year, when precipitation is high, this and the snow melt will fill the lake anyway. So it's unacceptable for the updates to offer a reduction in protection in future when there is a science-based system which, if applied correctly, will effectively eliminate serious floods from reservoir operations and improve water storage. Next slide, please. These are questions that our research suggests that DWR should answer and information that should be provided before the updates are finalized. An explanation of why the 835 feet was used, bottom was used in the studies, in the Faro studies. Explain why the DWR placed a limit of over 200 acre-feet flexible flood space during the rare heavier precipitation events, yet requests a reduction of 400,000 acre-feet to mitigate drought conditions. Explain whether consideration has been given to replacing the hard bottom of the flood space with the recovery of the conservation pool as an objective in selecting the reservoir lease volume so as to produce a win-win outcome for flood protection and water storage. Published a study which shows that lowering of the reservoir to 813 feet would eliminate dangerous floods from excessive precipitation and snowmelt. Explain whether and why the DWR favored Faro Plan 3 as opposed to Faro Plan 4. When we asked these questions, the answer we were given was policy. Now, who does decide DWR policy and what is the reasoning behind it? We've been told that policy is the reason for the seemingly illogical positions taken by the DWR. We've been told nothing about who makes the policy or given credible reasons for it. There is a profound lack of transparency. Given that DWR policy generally favors the decisions which seem to be intended to favor the provision of water, it's most likely that the state water contractors are the ultimate policy makers. The state water contractors' rights were established 60 years ago, and these rights will have to be relaxed or renegotiated if science is to be fully applied to minimizing the risks of the dam while maximizing water storage. The state water contractors have influence and responsibility over the dam's operation without accountability. The Oroville Dam may, because of its original financing, be the only major dam with this sort of dam governance. The independent forensic team's comprehensive report after the spillway incident concluded that in the past, the culture of the DWR was the reason for the errors made that caused and amplified the collapse of the spillway. Governance has a significant effect on culture. Our research into the Water Control Manual update has thrown some light on the DWR governance. The DWR's position on updates are not consistent with their constant assurances that safety will be the priority. The variance appeared to result from policies made outside the DWR, probably under the influence of state water contractors. The Commission should ask the DWR to explain the policies that mean Faro Plan 4 cannot be adopted and who makes these policies. 4 is being successfully used at the Mendocino Dam. We were told that the situation at Oroville was too complicated, but the Faro study did not think so. Anyway, dealing with complications requires science. This week we were told that it has been the cause which chose the Faro Plan 3 over Plan 4. We'll ask them why. Was it because limits based on rights established 69 years ago were placed on by the DWR, as was the case with the Faro study? If so, public safety and science are taking a back seat. I wonder whether water control manuals at other dams are restricted in this way. The Bullard's Bard certainly didn't appear to be. Makes no sense for these limits to stand in the way of science, which offers more safety and more water. If for some reason the Faro Plan cannot be included in the water control updates, to manual updates, the DWR could, with agreement of stakeholders, including the state water contractors, adopt the Faro Plan 4 voluntarily so that science is used to the fullest extent. Is this under consideration? The notes covering a meeting with the DW in March 27, which we received yesterday, gives us some hope. It indicated the DW is studying whether Faro Plan 3 or Plan 4 or some combination will be the best solution. I hope that is true. In the past, the safety appears to be left in the hands of the DWR. At other dams, operators and owners probably do put safety as a priority, but the past floods suggest that this has not been the case at Oroville in the past. What we have learned is that despite claims to the contrary, safety is not the DWR's priority now. The DWR, encouraged by the Commission, has, though, made significant improvements in transparency and given higher priority to safety. After past floods, the DWR has claimed that since they relied on the rules of the Water Control Manual, they could not be held accountable. This must stop. The duty of care should trump arbitrary, inflexible rules which cannot be expected to deal with extreme conditions. Faro Plan 4, with its flexible flood pool, shows how these can be dealt with. Initially, we'd hoped that prioritizing safety would continue to be the DWR's approach to the update, but the present proposal has dashed these hopes. Maybe that will change in the next few months. We now believe that our petition to FERC to hold the DWR accountable may have been misdirected because the DWR cannot be held accountable if key decisions on managing the reservoir and perhaps other things, such as the maintenance budget, are made by some other party. It would be appreciated if a meeting with the DWR could be scheduled in the next 30 days so the questions and suggestions in this presentation can be addressed. At the meeting on March the 27th, we were given the impression that the next time that we could argue our case would be the public core meetings in August. This may be too late. We're interested in how the reservoir is operated. In this, the DWR's intentions are at least as important as the Water Control Manual. We'd like the DWR to operate the reservoir in a way which we can accept. Thank you very much.
I'd like to first, this is Supervisor Conley. Thank you, Robert. I know you're very ill, and I appreciate that you had to do this from home, and I appreciate all your hard work. And again, I'm better at putting things in like layman's terms. And basically what we're seeing here is that during the negotiations, we were told that we could talk to FERC head of NEPA. We advocated very much to have a lot of input before NEPA, because after NEPA, the public or even local electeds, we're not going to have much input. And so we also noticed that the reason 4 went away is we're standing, as Mr. Yarborough said, this is what they paid for flood control. This is the level they get for flood control. Well, that is unreasonable to us, because we're willing to use the FIRO or the forecast operations to allow more money. We would never object to more water being held in time of drought or when forecast gets more relevant and more scientific as it goes on. It's not a perfect system, as we all know, but it's getting better. But there's this floor that you're not allowing us to go down under to really prove that you want public safety. And Matt Mentek's scientific explanation of this, which take an hour to listen to and all that, and probably you don't want to hear it, will show you how we could obtain this 500-year safety for downstream, even with climate change, the big, huge swings in weather. That's what we're talking about. You gotta start really listening to us and really taking not this manual that has this artificial floor, this concrete floor, that this is what was paid for 60 years ago, and be flexible to gain more water supply. And the other thing is, who are the policymakers? Give me the name. I would love to know the policymakers that got the Army Corps not to consider 4, or the policymakers that are behind the scenes that set this. I would love to know their names, because I would like to have a little debate with them. In the end, though, if we fail on all this, thank God you're recording it all. Because if the big flood comes, because we're not below 830, what Robert Bateman said was said to me by a DWR employee. If we flood you and we follow the manual, we will never be held accountable. That's a quote in a room in Yuba City. That's, some of the history that I bring to you. We want to change that. We want to be this partnership that puts truly safety in front of water delivery, because it surely looks like, without no emails or any perfect evidence to prove it, that somebody, a policymaker, is saying you can't go below 830 because we need to be able to deliver that water. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor, and thank you, Commissioner Bateman. I might make a couple of observations. First of all, clearly you've spent a lot of time and dug into this issue. The presentation is super technical. I think anybody who's not delving into these issues may be a little bit, just overwhelmed by the technical nature of it. But I also understand that that's the discussion that's being had is at that technical level. So in a moment, I'll ask probably John from DWR or somebody from DWR to, at a high level, respond. I do want to say though that I've been in this job for 8 years, and I have never had one conversation in public or certainly not in private about a desire to maximize water supply above flood safety. Everybody I've ever worked with at DWR, from the director on down, is focused on safety. And so I would just say that where we can articulate our differences and disagreements, I think that's helpful and constructive. But I don't have personally, you lose me if the suggestion is that somehow in a back room people are prioritizing supply over flooding or flood protection. But that's just from where I sit. And as you know, you should know by now, over the last few years, I'll be as candid as I can be on that.
I believe you. Let me make one more comment. I think it would be inappropriate right now to make those comments. I think that you should consider what we presented today and come offline and meet with us, and then maybe present them in the next meeting, because we presented a lot of reasonable expectations. And it isn't ever personal. I don't believe that you or Mr. Yarbo or anybody's talking directly to water contractors about water safety, but it sure appears to us when, I'll repeat, it's set at 830 and that's a contractual agreement and paid for, and there's no flexibility down. And then when we asked, this is the answer we got. That's policymakers. That's probably not you.
Yeah. So my only point is, because there's assertion that somehow there's a decision being made to prioritize something over public safety, I just need to tell you that from where I sit, I don't think that's the case. So I respect and want to make sure that you have time to share your perspectives, and I want to be clear on sharing mine right there. With that said, I think over the course of the life of this commission, we have created an opportunity for a lot of back and forth between those concerned about DWR's decision making with the folks at DWR. So recognizing that there's a lot of conversation, and there's been a good faith effort, I think, to try to memorialize those conversations and notes, et cetera. I recognize that this commission is a place to kind of surface these concerns, and I think it's appropriate. So I thank you guys for the presentation. Because these questions were focused on, at DWR, I do think it's helpful for the broad spectrum of commissioners that might not be tracking this in a detailed way to hear from John or somebody from DWR at a high level, not going point for point, but at a high level, and give us some context of how you respond to the analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. And Supervisor and Commissioner Bateman, this is John Yarbrough, Deputy Director for the Straight Water Project. And so, yeah, I did want to just offer a couple of thoughts here in response. And there is a lot of information that my team's been engaging with the commissioners on. And want to just reiterate, as the Deputy Director for the State Water Project, as the owner-operator of the project, that safety absolutely is our forefront, and using the flood space to prioritizing operation of that for safety over all other considerations. That is my clear direction to my team there. So I want to reiterate that. We are absolutely, again, I am excited that the study that we have transmitted over to the Corps that they are considering, this is where science, new forecasting, this is where that's being translated into different alternatives that the Corps is going to come back to us with. Which alternative and how those alternatives are then evaluated further, that work is being done by the Corps, and that's not a role that DWR has on picking which alternative, what should be done there. So really, we're like folks on this call here are really excited, waiting for August when we're going to see what the Corps is coming back to us after they've done this far more detailed, complicated analysis of what is the way to operate Oroville, where we can take this existing flood reservation and we can use flexibility to get out some more flood benefits and some more water supply benefits. So, again, really looking for August, and think that's going to be a real point for us to then have some information to look at further. So, thank you, Secretary. Back to you.
And John, you say August because that's when the Army Corps expects to release the draft water control manual update, or what?
Yeah, that is when, right now, the work is all being done by the Army Corps, and so that's August time frame is when we're expecting to get the product of that work back to see how the Corps has taken these different alternatives that the commissioners here talked about in their presentation, how they've taken those, turned those into their proposal for operations for the reservoir.
Got it. Let me just, for those who are maybe joining for the first time, or commissioners that aren't living the issues around management of the reservoir, the way I would describe this to somebody who's never delved into this is the Army Corps is the federal entity, obviously, charged with protecting us from flood risk, within the reservoir through this manual of operations. And so it's essentially like the Bible around how the reservoir is operated to protect us from floods. And it's been unchanged for decades. And this update is focused on changing the rules to operate the reservoir. The idea is to try to bring new science and sort of modernized approach. And there, are real concerns and focus on how those rule changes will impact flood safety. So that's really where we're at. And I think it would be helpful after that draft is released to, Supervisor Connolly, and I think Commissioner Bateman's desire probably to delve deeper into this, or to the next click of the conversation. I think it would be helpful to have that see a little flesh on the bone from what the Army Corps is actually recommending. That's my take anyway. I want to open it up to other commissioners to ask questions or provide comments both on Mr. Bateman's presentation as well as anything that John Yarbo from DWR has shared. So Tara, I presume you don't see any hands up, or people can take themselves off mute. So my take would be, if I'm making a suggestion for the tracker, would be, the request to keep this on the agenda, obviously, because this is one of the main topics relevant to the commission that, we're, interacting with, and to have this agendized, for the next meeting with an update, hopefully with a better sense of how the Army Corps is taking in this information and, proposing rule changes. Because to me, that's really where the rubber meets the road that is important to discuss and understand. Any other?
Yeah, if we could have a meeting sometime, because the DWR has set restraints on the limit, on what the Corps proposing, and it sounds as though they're thinking of releasing. Oh, some of these may be relaxed, but I think and certainly on the Faro study, the the DWR did, or the State Water Project did set some limits, and we've been told that those limits did affect the results. And those limits are being carried over into the water control manual update considerations. So to get the DWR is not really off the hook. They are involved in setting the parameters around the updates. And we'd like to have some further discussions of that before August, because by August the thing is going to be more or less set in stone.
So one of the things I've encouraged, and I think I appreciate that DWR has followed this, is to ensure that there's as much interaction between those on the commission or members of the public that have concerns about the decision making at DWR, either on this or on other topics that we've raised. And I've appreciated those offline discussions. I want to, John, and I know your team has got a lot of things going, but I do think it would be helpful to have another meeting to go. I mean, I don't know if anything that's being presented here by Mr. Bateman is new, or if this is a new presentation, but I want to exhaust the communication between you all, and I'm certainly open to making that a meeting that other commissioners are invited to, should they want to join.
That makes sense. And I must say the personnel we've spoken to at the DWR do seem earnestly and devoted to putting safety first. But then we get it back onto this policy, which we don't understand why it was made. Why did someone set the 835 limit, for instance? It didn't have that at Ballard's Bar. And they are building a spillway at Great Cross so they can lower their lake more, and they're going to take full use of it. Whereas we could and we're not. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that perspective. I want to suggest we're coming up on the hour. I know we're going to lose commissioners. I'm supposed to be leading another meeting here at the agency at that time. What I would ask John on the DWR is to organize this meeting, is to take the specific of the last 2 slides or 3 slides that Commissioner Bateman presented, particularly with the very specific questions. There may be just ongoing disagreement between some of our commissioners or members of the public and DWR, but I do think to the extent that we can very clearly answer, questions of fact, so that there's real clarity and, as you say, transparency. So I'll look forward to that meeting being organized, and then if we can, just Tara, if everyone's amenable, who's part of that meeting, just inviting other commissioners or their offices to participate if they can.
Thank you. We have tried to get other commissions involved, but that the interest has been limited. But we'd really welcome more commissioners working with us. Thanks.
Thank you both. And I know it comes from a real focus and concern that you have, and I can imagine, Commissioner Bateman, how much time you spent on this analysis. So we want to move to our last item, which is public comment. Very important to us to enable public comment. I'm going to ask that we do our normal public comment of 3 minutes or less, not because we don't want to hear for longer, but just because we have to make it through the meeting and let the commissioners out to their other obligations. So let's move forward and welcome public comment. And I think you can do so by raising your virtual hand on this platform. And if for whatever reason you're not being acknowledged or people can't see your hands, you can always take yourself off mute. But why don't I turn to you, Tara or James, to call on people?
Yep. I think first up we have Matt Mentink. And Matt, I've allowed you to speak. You will need to unmute yourself. It looks like you are unmuted. Are you speaking?
Matt, we cannot hear you.
Maybe while we work with Matt, or Matt works on trying to get a audio connection, we can move on to the next person and then circle back to him.
Yeah. I see Jonathan Young has his hand up.
Good morning. This is Jonathan Young from the State Water Contractors. I just wanted to chime in on some of the stuff I heard. And I first wanted to say, Robert, I hope you feel better. One of the points I want to make is that safety of the downstream communities is a priority for the State Water Contractors. And as to such, we don't make any decisions or recommendations to the Department of Water Resources regarding flood control or flood control operations. The state water contractors do pay for operations and maintenance of these facilities, but we leave the decision-making, including budgeting, to DWR of how to maintain these facilities. One of the things we do on the state water contractors is we frequently advocate for additional flood control funding at the state and federal levels, including in our advocacy efforts for bonds to include funding for these efforts. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is the ultimate decider for the water control manual, not the state water contractors nor DWR. One of the things that the contractors have been supportive of in the past is the forecast-informed reservoir operations, which we believe will improve the safety and operations of dams and reservoirs throughout the state. I want to thank you for your time and appreciate this discussion today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for joining us for the entirety of the meeting. Next.
Hello?
Oh, Matt, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for asking that Robert's questions on the latter part of his presentation become part of the tracking items. A couple other things quickly on the tracking log. There was mention that the that Fish and Wildlife issued their position on FERC relicensing. Could the tracking log also make sure that we're provided a link to access that? Another thing on the tracking log, we didn't reach forum today. We haven't seen Yuba County in a year. We haven't seen a Sutter County member for 3 meetings in a row. According to the charter, he should be removed and another one should be selected. We were told that the presentation covering our work on this water control update must be presented by a commissioner and not a volunteer commissioner analyst, which did most of the legwork for this. And I think you should ease the restrictions on who can speak at what is called a citizen advisory commission. To pick up where Robert left off real quickly, I'm afraid I'm going to lose this, the senator. At the last meeting, Carla agreed after our presentation stating the difference between Plan 3 and Plan 4, that she wants to be as aligned as she can with the downstream folks, and that the flood pool can be flexible based upon the meteorology, the hydrology that supports that information. What we're stuck in right now is this hard bottom to a reservoir pool that Oroville doesn't want to go beyond because they think that's the only way that they can protect the water contractors' rights to the water they paid for, where that's not the case. Science has advanced enough and the decision support tools have advanced enough, as outlined in the fire report, that we can recover the conservation pool while still providing flood protection. And if we would change the objective on the interest of the state water contractors to say, we may dip into your conservation pool even deeper, but the chances are that we're going to recover your conservation pool at the end of the event because of the sheer volume of the peak inflows that happen during a 300-year event. As we came out of Firo, a 300-year event would send 10 feet of water over the auxiliary spillway. It would overtop downstream levees by for 48 hours because this arbitrary hard rule on we don't drop into the conservation pool to protect water. And I think that's what Robert was trying to get to. So let's just say we're both going to win. We'll flex down all the way to the gates if we need to, if the information tells us that we could still recover the conservation pool. We went through all these years of the fire study, leading experts on the West Coast, but yet we did not tell them that voluntary dipping deeper was an option. We're told that DWR has no intent of changing the size of the pool, and that's the whole problem. Yuba Water came on today and said, we're so committed to flood protection that we're going to put in another spillway. Millions of dollars being spent to put in their ARC spillway because currently they don't have the capacity. DWR has the capacity past a 500-year flood in a Central Valley hydrology study report. If they start at 860 and drop to the gates, but yet they're saying we won't. And that's what we need to iron out. The second plan that got eliminated was going to be reviewed by Jennifer's team until she gets a call from Army Corps of Engineers in Washington, D.C., who normally doesn't get involved in these until the regional manager has to sign off and says, we're eliminating this plan. It was to be part of the NEPTA process. As of our last meeting in October, during the February scoping meeting, she notified us that that was eliminated by somebody back in Washington, D.C.
Matt, we're a little over 2 minutes after your public comment, so I'm just going to ask you to wrap it up because I do need to release the commissioners here.
So that gives you a summary of what we were trying to talk about. Is let's remove this false pretense that the only way to protect the contractor's water is by putting hard bottoms on releases. The science is there that we can both win. We can provide a 1 in 500-year flood, and we can still get their water to them. Let's change our thinking.
Thank
and
you.
We're really curious on why the plan that gave the.
I've got to ask just to conclude here. I do thank you for your input on the tracker, and I want to note those and ask Tara to consider, implementing those recommendations on the tracker. And I also appreciate how much work Mr. Mentek has done in support of Mr. Bateman and his desire to have more time. But I do want to run these meetings as efficiently as we have been, just to enable and frankly encourage everybody to continue to participate. So with that said, Tara, is there any more public comment?
I do not see any more hands.
Okay. So our next Citizens Advisory Commission meeting is planned later this summer. Still confirming the date, but we'll send out a calendar hold to commissioners as when we get that, and we'll update the website for the public as soon as we can. Huge thanks for everybody for your continued involvement. Thank you to the presenters, both on the commission and those visiting us or joining us today. Once again, Tara, to you and Kearns and West, thanks for keeping us so organized. With that said, this meeting is adjourned.